While America in the 90s was busy enjoying an economic boom and debating the finale of Seinfeld, on the other side of the planet, a recently deceased country called the Soviet Union was having, let's just say, a rough go of it. Imagine the Great Depression, but with way more tracksuits and a bunch of nuclear codes just lying around somewhere. Into this chaos stepped a man. He wasn't a charismatic politician or a slick Wall Street banker. Nope, he looked like your high school math teacher. You know, the one who was a little too into prime numbers. His name was Sergey Mavrodi, and he was about to launch the most insane, most brazen, and arguably the most successful Ponzi scheme in human history. So forget Bernie Madoff. Madoff was for the rich. This was for everyone. This is the story of how a nerdy recluse convinced 15 million people, that's like the entire population of Pennsylvania, to hand over their life savings. It's about how he became more popular than the Beatles, got himself elected to parliament to avoid prison, and then tried to do it all over again with Bitcoin. Buckle up, this isn't just a scam. This is the Super Bowl of financial fraud. So, who was this Sergey Mavrodi guy? Before he became a financial messiah to millions, he was, to put it mildly, an oddball, a math prodigy who, in his youth, sold pirated VHS tapes, bred aquarium fish, and imported butterflies. Yes, live butterflies. Apparently, even back then, he understood you could make money literally out of thin air. By 1994, he had cooked up his masterstroke. The idea was as simple as a baseball bat. He started issuing so-called shares in his company, MMM. Just look at this thing. They didn't have a fancy corporate logo. They had a portrait of Mavrodi himself. Imagine buying a share of Apple, and instead of the apple, it's just a picture of Steve Jobs staring into your soul. Arrogance? Genius. Here's how the scheme worked. Today, you buy this piece of paper for, say, $1. Mavrodi promises that tomorrow or next week, he'll buy it back from you for $2. Where does the money come from? Well, duh. From the new people who bring in their dollars. It's a classic Ponzi scheme, with one key difference. Charles Ponzi tried to hide his scheme. Mavrodi, he turned his into a national television show. This was Mavrodi's secret weapon. This is Leonid Golubkov. For Americans, think of him as the Joe the plumber of a Ponzi scheme. A simple, blue-collar backhoe operator who became the face of the company. In the first ad, he's just a simple guy, thrilled that he can finally buy his wife a nice pair of boots. In the next one, it's a fur coat, then a car, then a house. At some point, Leonia is sitting in an armchair, talking about buying a villa in Paris. This was the American dream on steroids, minus that boring hard work part. In a matter of months, this ordinary guy went from working class to millionaire, right before the entire country's eyes, and the country bought it. People lined up for miles to hand over their money. They sold their apartments, their cars, their family heirlooms. Why work when you could just become a partner of Leonid Golubkov and watch your money magically double? The scale of this madness is hard to comprehend. By some estimates, between 10 and 15 million people invested in MMM. In just 6 months, the company allegedly sucked in up to a third of Russia's entire national budget. They couldn't even count the money fast enough. Employees later said they just piled the cash into huge rooms. They weren't measuring money in stacks, they were measuring it in square footage. And this is where the story gets truly insane. When the government and the tax authorities finally woke up and realized there was a giant nationwide money vacuum cleaner in operation, they tried to shut it down. So what did the people do? Imagine the FBI arresting Bernie Madoff, and thousands of his victims marching on Times Square with signs saying, "Free Bernie" and "Hands off our money." Sounds crazy, right? Well, in Russia, that's exactly what happened. People held rallies to defend Mavrodi. They didn't see him as a crook. He was a folk hero who had given them a chance. He wasn't selling shares. He was selling hope. It was a paid subscription, sure, but it was high-quality stuff. But Mavrodi didn't stop there. When he was eventually arrested, he made a move that cemented his place in the Hall of Fame of great con artists. What do you do when you're facing serious prison time? That's right, you become part of the government. From his prison cell, Mavrodi ran for a seat in the Russian parliament, the State Duma. And guess what? He won in a landslide. They had to release him from custody because he now had parliamentary immunity. Picture this. Madoff, while under federal investigation, wins a seat in Congress for the state of New York, walks out of the courthouse, and flips off the prosecutors. In 92nd Russia, this was actually possible. For a brief shining moment, Sergey Mavrodi was literally untouchable. He wasn't just a con man, he was a god, a king, and a congressman, all rolled into one. It seemed like the party would never end. But as we all know, every party with free drinks eventually leads to a morning after with a killer hangover. Any Ponzi scheme is like Wile E. Coyote chasing the roadrunner. He runs off a cliff and keeps sprinting on thin air, operating on pure, unadulterated belief. But sooner or later, he makes the mistake of looking down, and that's when gravity remembers he exists. In the summer of 1994, the Russian government forced everyone to look down. The government, which had either been ignoring Mavrodi or, according to some rumors, was secretly investing themselves, suddenly declared him public enemy number one. The tax police, citing tax evasion, surprise, surprise, launched a full-blown raid. In reality, it was just a pretext. The real reason was that Mavrodi had gotten too big. He was threatening the financial stability of the entire country. He was like Uber for taxi drivers, but for the nation's central bank. Mavrodi's response was both brilliant and diabolical. He went on television and announced that the government was trying to steal the people's money, and to prevent that, he was slashing the value of his shares by a factor of 127 overnight. Imagine Apple stock falling from $200 to $1.50 in a single day. It was the end. The country was seized by a panic on par with the stock market crash of 1929. The happy-go-lucky commercials with Leonia Golubkov were replaced with heartbreaking news reports. Yesterday's happy partners instantly became victims. Dozens of people who lost everything committed suicide. Grandmothers who had sold their apartments were left homeless. But the craziest part, many of them didn't blame Mavrodi. They blamed the government for destroying their dream. Mavrodi had so masterfully brainwashed them that even after the collapse, he remained a Robin Hood figure in their eyes. And where was the great mastermind himself? After being stripped of his parliamentary immunity, he simply stopped showing up to sessions, claiming it was boring. He disappeared, vanished. For several years, he became the most wanted man in Russia. Interpol was looking for him all over the world, and he was hiding in a regular rented apartment right in Moscow the entire time, in total isolation. The genius who controlled billions and the fates of millions was living like a recluse hacker, ordering food delivery and communicating with the world only through the internet. They found him in 2003. They say at the moment of his arrest, he was calmly reading a book, probably about finance. His trial was a farce. The case against him consisted of 600 volumes. The indictment was thicker than War and Peace. His lawyers dragged out the process by reading every single page out loud. Finally, in 2007, he was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. But since he had already served almost all of that time in pre-trial detention, he walked free just a month later. You would think the story ends there. The scammer is punished, the country has learned its lesson. A logical ending for any Hollywood drama. But this is Russia, and here, every story has a sequel. You thought that was the end? Not even close. In 2011, in the age of social media and smartphones, Mavrodi returns. He stares into a webcam with that same deadpan smirk and announces the launch of MMM 2011. He didn't even try to hide it. He said it openly. Yes, this is a financial pyramid. Money doesn't appear from thin air. Payouts to the first members come from the money of those who join later. That's like a cigarette company writing on the pack. Yes, this is poison. You will die. But damn, don't you look cool smoking it? And what do you think happened? People started giving him money. Again. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. It proved one simple truth. Financial memory is incredibly short. But this time, Mavrodi was thinking globally. Realizing he had nearly exhausted the supply of gullible citizens at home, he decided to bring his gift to the rest of the world. His new pyramid, now operating through the internet and cryptocurrencies, spread its tentacles across the globe. It became especially successful in developing nations. In Nigeria, for example, MMM became so popular that the government had to issue an emergency national address. In Zimbabwe, he was promising returns of 50% a month to a country on the brink of total economic collapse. He became the world's first global, decentralized, crypto-powered super scammer, the Elon Musk of Ponzi schemes. But the end of his life was stripped of any Hollywood glamour. In March 2018, 62-year-old Sergey Mavrodi felt sick at a random public bus stop in Moscow. A passerby called an ambulance, but doctors couldn't save him. He died of a heart attack, alone, with no billions. The great mastermind whose name once shook a nation ended his journey the same way as millions of his victims, broke and anonymous. Only a few dozen people came to his funeral, and it was reportedly paid for by his former investors. The irony is staggering. So who was Sergey Mavrodi? An evil genius? A financial terrorist? Or was he just a mirror, reflecting our own very human weaknesses? Greed, naivete, and a desperate, unkillable belief in miracles. The story of MMM isn't just some weird Russian tale. It's a universal parable. A parable that the only free cheese is in a mousetrap or a Ponzi scheme, but you always end up paying for it, and usually you pay triple. Since then, many new Mavrodis have appeared. They promise you fortunes in crypto, in forex, and cashback schemes. Leonia Golubkov just changes his name, but his pitch is the same. He's still promising you boots, a Lamborghini, and a house in Miami. The key is to always remember who's ultimately paying for the party. Have you or anyone you know ever encountered a scheme like this? Drop your story in the comments. But please, no referral links to your cousin's new guaranteed win crypto project. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button if you believe the best investment is in your own financial education. And ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode about the guy who sold the Eiffel Tower twice. See you next time.